As I begin my time, I'd like to first extend a hearty thanks to everyone for being here today and making the following resolution debatable. The United States should repeal the Patriot Act. So what I'm going to be doing in my 7 minutes and how I'm going to go about this resolution is first I'm going to be talking about definitions, kind of how we're going to set up the round. Then I'm going to be going into the affirmation plan text. This is a policy motion, meaning that the affirmation is burdened to provide a plan as to how we're going to repeal the Patriot Act. Then I'll be going into our 3 advantages to our plan and why repealing the Patriot Act would be more beneficial for the United States. So, going on to definitions, pretty much everything is contextual. A word about the Patriot Act. Essentially what it is it was passed in 2001 in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And it basically had 2 major parts. It had other sections as well, but they're not really as significant as these 2. One being that it removed many obstacles that the FBI and other police forces had in regards to investigating terrorism, meaning wiretaps, other forms of surveillance that were ordinarily blocked by constitutional or legislative boundaries. It removed some of those. And the second part would be it also strengthened border control. And so those are the 2 major parts that we're going to be repealing. However, I would like to note that everything else is contextual. I don't think there'll be many definition squabbles. But the judging criteria of the round, what the scope is that we're looking through this round is benefits to the United States and its social contract. So a word about the social contract, what it essentially is it's the give and take of a government and its people. The people give their consent to be governed for a myriad of things. They also give taxes, etc. And the government in return offers to provide many other things, such as defense, liberty, etc. So we're going to be using that. And the affirmation policy is essentially going to be that as soon as possible, Congress will pass a bill removing the Patriot Act. So it'll be through normal means, and it doesn't require any funding. But I'd like to just do a quick tidbit about this. The bill that we're going to be passing to repeal the Patriot Act will keep the current definitions of terrorism. So cyber terrorism, etc. All of that will still stay in the status quo as terrorism, just so that there's no mucking up of what exactly we're doing. All right, so before I move on to my case, do you guys have any questions about what we're doing? Okay, fantastic. Then, so as I go, my first contention is essentially going to be tagline liberty. And this is the idea that one of the things that the social contract entails that the government gives to its people, or one of the promises that it has according to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, is to secure the blessings of liberty. Meaning you have, as a United States citizen, a certain amount of rights that you get to enjoy as a United States citizen. Things that the government can and cannot do to you when you are a citizen. And one of the things that actually recently was added about a few decades back was the right to privacy. Essentially, it's this idea that you can't have a Big Brother-esque government coming in and essentially spying on you. Right? It kind of removed that kind of future from the United States. However, what we see with the Patriot Act is that it removes some of those blocks. It kind of violates your rights to privacy, because essentially what it does is say, oh, we no longer have to get a warrant from a judge to deem it worthy to wiretap your house. We just have to think you're a terrorist, and that's it. That's basically that in and of itself is completely bypassing all of the laws and all of the obstacles in place from violating that right to privacy. And therefore, a bit of evidence for you on why exactly the people are mad about this is that Obama's approval rating fell to about 40% just this past month. And one of the primary reasons stated for this was the fact that he was keeping the Patriot Act, even after the NSA was exposed, etc. All of those things kind of compiled into this one general disliking of the violation of the right to privacy. As such, what we can see here, what we can impact this from, is that when the people aren't pleased with the way the social contract give and take is going, how the status quo and that is, the people are angry about that, and that can lead, and that's the road to anarchy. That's the road to revolution, essentially, is when people are dissatisfied with their government and the services the government's providing, or the rights that they're providing, then that's the road to revolution, as we can see with examples such as France and Russia. All right, so the second contention that I have is regarding inefficiency, and this is the idea that the Patriot Act says it does things, and it claims credit for a lot of things, but in reality, it's actually non-exclusive, or it doesn't really matter. So my subpoint A, and this is regarding, it claims to increase defense. It says, like, well, you're safer now because we can weed out the terrorists. That's actually not true. The NSA is the reason for that. And there's a significant difference here because the Patriot Act is essentially wiretapping. It's saying, like, look, we can bypass some of these obstacles to wiretap and spy on you directly. However, what the NSA does is it searches for patterns. Who you've called, etc. It's not an actual clear violation of privacy in the name of the Patriot Act. The two were separate. And the NSA has been proven, it has clear evidence to say, look, we've stopped so many terrorist attacks, etc., whereas the Patriot Act really hasn't. So the Patriot Act doesn't have any real hard evidence or examples to show that it actually is improving the security of this nation. As such, its main purpose and the reason that it was put into legislation is not true, or at least it's not doing an effective job. My second point in this contention would be regarding its immigration and the idea that, well, it's strengthening our borders. I have two responses to this kind of myth. The first being that it doesn't actually stop immigration, it just forces immigrants who are crossing the border illegally to take more dangerous routes through the deserts and such. It doesn't actually slow immigration. And the second being that the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act that is currently in Congress right now would pretty much fill in all the gaps. So we have an inherent solvency of the border anyway, so repealing the Patriot Act would be getting rid of all of the questionable things about it violating privacy while not actually leaving any holes behind, which is really nice. The third and final contention that I have for you today, Judge, is regarding the fact that the Patriot Act was essentially rushed through Congress. It was a kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision because it was in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and I don't think anybody can really refute that. The idea here is that it was hurried through the Senate, and it wasn't actually debated. Everybody was like, yeah, war, let's get him back, let's stop terrorism here at home. But they didn't actually stop to question it. That's completely throwing, and the impact here, Judge, that's completely throwing the frame of which our government takes out the window. It pretty much nullifies the entire concept that the government is meant to represent the ideas of the people by having clash and debate and having discussions over what legislation they're passing. And so for all of these reasons, I urge a strong vote in favor of the affirmation. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to use my phone. I lost my charger in class today, or my timer. I'll leave this. All right. So before I begin, any questions? Or is everyone ready? All right. Starting time. So before I begin, I would just like to thank everyone for being here today and making today's day possible. With that being stated, I will do a little roadmap here. I'll show you what I'm doing. I will go over the definitions, and most of which we agree to. And then I will be addressing our plan as negation, and as a policy motion, we have to. Well, I'll go over that later. And then I will be refuting their case before I go on my own. So, with that being stated, the definitions contextual. We completely agree with that. That totally makes sense. Their judging criteria was benefits to the social contract. We also agree with that. With kind of an underlying value alignment, just to kind of explain how the social contract relates to the judging criteria, would be the social contract is American values. He went over that in his own speech. But so with value alignment, what we're saying is we should take these core American values and we should relate it back to the social contract. And so that's just a little clarification there on the judgment criteria. So with that being stated, our plan today, we do agree with that this is indeed a policy motion. But as a negation team, we don't have to necessarily state a policy. Instead, we can argue the status quo. We can argue that we don't need a policy, that we don't need to change what's happening right now. We can argue for the status quo, how things are right here, right now. So with that being stated, with that being stated, I will go into their speech. Their first contention was that of liberty. And they said the U.S. promised liberty, and that one of the points that they made was that Obama's credibility has fallen, and I completely agree. However, I do not think it is because of the, I don't personally believe that it's because of the NSA incident. I believe it's more on Syria. Any time that the United States has entered war, the president has the president's credibility has always fallen consistently throughout the past. We can see this, all the way back to World War II. So by saying that this is because of the NSA incident, that's not quite relevant to today's debate, and I don't believe that's true. Please keep that in mind as I take the first of two POIs.
Yes, sorry to backtrack a little bit, but regarding what you were going over in the criteria of value alignment, you were talking about core American values. What are those values that you were just talking about?
Well, those values are the same that you went over in your own speech, but basically, just to kind of clarify, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, the Constitution, basically, American values, that goes back to what Americans hold dear, what they consider to be true. So, like I said, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Also, moral foundation theory, which I'll be explaining later, as well as Maslow's hierarchy, which I will also mention later. So, once again, refuting the first contention, it's not true. It's because of Syria. It's not because of the NSA, and that's completely false. So, going into their let me just touch on another point of their first contention. They said that we're taking away these privacy rights to Americans. Well, that's not necessarily true. If that was true, then it wouldn't happen. The American government is set up so that it creates things and then it moves on from that, accepting what they created to be true. Now, they stated that we implemented this idea of privacy into our government. Now, with that being instated into our government cannot go against that privacy. Instead, they work their way around it, and they find different ways that don't violate quote unquote privacy, but do accomplish the ends that they want to accomplish. So that's their first contention. Their second contention was that of inefficiency. They said that the NSA has done stuff, but the Patriot Act hasn't. They said that it hasn't quantitatively shown any real evidence that it has stopped terrorist attacks. Now, that's not true, Judge. I would like to refute that by bringing up the underwear bomber of 2011, I think. I'm not sure. But this was a result of increased security. Why does it take so long for you to get onto your plane? It's because of the Patriot Act. It's because we instated this extra security to make sure weapons of mass destruction do not enter onto planes. Please keep that in mind as I take their second and last POI.
Yes, just a quick point of clarification. As we outlined in our definitions of the Patriot Act and actually what the Patriot Act is, airport security has no real link to the Patriot Act. So if your evidence is based on increased airport security, that actually isn't a relevant example.
That's actually not true. You mentioned very specifically that there were two main parts. One was the increased border control and increased security, and the second was it removed obstacles as far as getting legislation passed, as far as searches and seizures. So I'm kind of low on time here. So their second contention was that of inefficiency. I already refuted that by saying that the underwear bomber was stopped, and that is a quantitative evidence that the Patriot Act is doing good. Their third contention was that it was rushed, and that there wasn't much debate when it was originally passed. And I do agree with this. However, because of the government and the way the government is set up with the system of checks and balances, this has been debated countless times throughout everything from Congress to debates similar to these. So it has been, although it was originally not really debated, it has been looked at through the eyes of many people since then, and would have been refuted if it was not, good. So with that being stated, I will quickly go into my own case. My first contention was that it provides for welfare. Now, domestic terrorism is a real and constant threat, and in 9/11, which they brought up, the FBI had actual evidence of that plot, but could not act on that plot because of the restrictions of getting it passed through court and all that stuff. And that was according to the Guardian.com. Now, because of the Patriot Act, we now have letters that they can get so that they can immediately react to threats. Now, my partner will go over my second contention in her speech. Please, thank you, and please vote for the affirmation team. Let's put this fly. It was circling me. Okay.
It's like
That is
you.
it. All right.
Alright, is everybody ready? Opponents ready? With that, I'll start my time. So first off, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today, our judge for making this debate possible, my opponents for so far making this a great debate, and of course my supportive partners. So just a quick roadmap, I'm first going to be going into just the judging criteria, just a little clarification. Then I'll be going into our case, and then briefly going over my opponent's first contention. So with that, my opponents basically, they agreed with our definitions, and then they talked about the judging criteria. They said, okay, we agree that should be benefits to the United States in the social contract, but they said we're going to add that it's going to be underlying the value of alignment. So that's great, but basically all they're saying is they're talking about rights. Just to clarify that, and that's something I'm going to bring up later, is they're bringing up that we should be valuing the rights of the people, which is something we bring up a lot in our case, and I'll point that out as I go through. So going into our contentions. Our first contention was that of liberty, and all my opponents really said to this, they said, well, as my personal belief, Obama's approval ratings, which by the way, has gone down 40% in this last month, is due to Syria. They said this whole idea of what this whole war in Syria, that's the reason why Obama's approval ratings are going down. However, nothing has actually gone on with Obama in Syria. He has proposed an idea and talked to Congress about it, but nothing rational has actually been done. And so first of all, that's my opponent's personal belief, which personal belief shouldn't even be brought up in today's debate. Second of all, we have shown that research has been dropped 40%, and this is due to the Patriot Act. Yes, I'll take your POI.
You mentioned that it was only my opinion. I will like to state that there is hard evidence that during times of war and conflict, the president's approval has gone down.
Okay, so my opponents say that it's not just his personal opinion. There is evidence that during war and conflict, some presidents' approval ratings have gone down. However, this isn't a war. Nothing has happened yet. So this isn't really relevant in today's debate. And as we've been showing, Obama's approval ratings, which is currently the status quo, what is going on, not just in the past, this is what happened, is due to the Patriot Act. So, also, my opponent said, well, it's not necessarily true that we're taking rights away, and they didn't really talk about this. They just said, well, that's not exactly true. I'm going to move on now. However, this is a big deal. We are taking the rights of the people away. As my partner already brought up in his speech, is that, okay, the social contract, which is what we're talking about today, is this idea of what the government gives us, which is this idea of security. We have to abide back with actually abiding by the laws. And that's an example of what the social contract does. And so with the Patriot Act, it's violating the right to privacy that we as the people have. And it says, and as my partner said, that the government just needs to think that you're a terrorist, and all of your rights seem to just disappear. You don't need a warrant anymore. They can listen in, they can wiretap, which is basically what our policy would get rid of. And that's taking away the rights of the people. There's a good example of how it is taking away the rights. My opponents just ignored that and said, well, it's not actually necessarily doing this, so that's not a big deal. It is a big deal. That's a huge impact of the Patriot Act. That's what is making a lot of people angry. They don't feel safe because they can be wiretapped by their government anytime they feel that maybe they're being a terrorist. So going on to our second contention is that of inefficiency. And our second contention A was talking about how the Patriot Act says things that isn't actually happening. For example, it doesn't increase defense, and the NSA does. And my opponent said, well, the Patriot Act in 2011, there was an underwear bomber, and because of the Patriot Act, that was stopped. That wasn't the Patriot Act. That was just airport security in general, as my partner already said in a POI. And my opponent's response to this was, well, you stated in your case that security is the Patriot Act. However, we said in our case that it's increasing security of border control, not airport control. Airport security is a whole different matter. It isn't to do with the Patriot Act. Yes, they have increased their control in their security in airports due to 9/11, but that wasn't the Patriot Act, so that is irrelevant to today's debate. And as we've been saying before already, it's not the NSA is what's making a difference. And then our second contention B was talking about immigration and how it's not actually stopping immigration, it's just making it immigrants take a harder, more dangerous route. And we talked about how the comprehensive immigration reform, which is this bill that's going through Congress right now, would already solve for these problems, that we don't need the Patriot Act for that. And this was completely dropped by my opponents, which is a huge part of, it's one of two reasons that we brought up in our case of why the Patriot Act should and can be repealed. So going on to our third contention is that of the Patriot Act was rushed through Congress. So 9/11, 2001 was when 9/11 happened. It was October 26, 2011, that the Patriot Act was passed. This is not very much time, Judge. Usually, as my partner already stated, Congress debates, bills are debated through and acts are debated throughout the government continuously, and this helps to delete any source of error so that an act is really helpful and makes a difference. However, this act was hurried, and as we've shown, that it's not, it leaves holes. And my opponents just said, well, it's been debated countless times. That was after it's already been passed, so that's irrelevant to what we're talking about today. And now I'll quickly go into my opponent's contention. They had one contention that said provides welfare. And then they basically said that, well, the Patriot Act means that we can react to threats, which we couldn't before. However, that's not true. That's not, as we're saying, that's not what the Patriot Act is doing. The NSA is what can react to threats and can notice threats. For instance, what the NSA does is it listens in to phone calls. It doesn't listen in like what would happen with the Patriot Act, but it's basically just listening for patterns that could be a potential threat, and that will lead to further research with warrants for reasoning, and is, as we said before, is benefiting the United States, the social contract, and the value alignment of our rights as U.S. citizens. And for all these reasons, I just strong vote in affirmation. Thank you.
Why did you bang in the middle of her speech?
Sorry? That's like knocking. It's applause.
It's like, it's like the quiet version of clapping, so if someone agrees with something that's being said.
Okay. I was wondering just you do it at the end of the...
At the end of the speeches.
Oh,
yeah. That's why both teams applause.
That's applause. Okay.
Sometimes, like, even the other team will say, okay, that's a good point.
Okay, fine. I like it.
I wasn't just trying to like mess around. Like, all right. That was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's kind of crap. They shouldn't need to tap it. Because the,
Starting time now. As I begin, I would like to thank everybody for making this debate possible, heralding in a wonderful new debate season. I would like to jump right in by saying that as this is a very interesting debate, it is also a very timely debate, seeing as it is 9/11, which was one of the biggest occurrences especially in the 20th century, 21st century. But I would like to bring the attention back to the Patriot Act, which is what this is all about, and how it is, in fact, benefiting the U.S. currently. So I'm going to go into my opponent's contention of liberty. They're saying that this is taking away our privacy rights, that this is compromising the rights of the people, and that Obama, this is evident in Obama's supporting the Patriot Act and his falling in general approval. And my partner brought up that this is because he's about to start a war. It's not from the NSA actions. This is or from anything about the Patriot Act. This is because there's only a 25% approval of us interfering in Syria. So really, when you look at it, that is pretty much irrelevant to this debate. And while liberty is very much important, I'd like to go into in a minute how it is only an aspect of what we should be looking at today. I'll take your first POR.
Oh, yeah, fantastic. So, how do you respond to the fact that the evidence that we provided about the 40%, there were actually two parts. The first being that it was 40%, and the second was actually evidence saying that this was because of the Patriot Act, something that we've said multiple times, but I don't think has been picked up on.
So, I never heard any evidence for it being directly related to the Patriot Act. What I do know is that there is, based on polling report recently, there is only 25% support of our intervention in Syria, which is in fact a big deal currently with Obama. And I do believe that that is the main attribution for 40% decrease in approval for him, not in fact Patriot Act issues. What I would like to bring up now, though, is the Maslow's hierarchy, which is part of our value alignment, part of the underlying value alignment judging criteria that we added on. And now Maslow's hierarchy says that before anything such as self-actualization or self-esteem or even a sense of belonging can be met, we have to have physical and safety needs met. Each and every human being has to have, has to be fed, has to be clothed, has to be sheltered, and has to feel safe before they can move on to anything else, including government or including wanting their rights. And so what I'm here to say right now is that the Patriot Act is guaranteeing us this level of safety, which we cannot have, only at the top of the pyramid. We cannot only have self-actualization in this wonderful country based off of poverty or off of terrorism. This simply is not an effective model for government. I'm going to take your second P line.
Right, so you said that the people have the right to feel safe, but why should the people have the government listening into their phone calls while the NSA is doing the same thing without being taking away their right to privacy?
So the NSA are part of the government, correct? And that is not what the Patriot Act is doing is not establishing the NSA, because the NSA will be there, correct, whether or not we have the Patriot Act. The NSA, however, is allowing us to to observe where patterns to find terrorists. The Patriot Act allows us to act on it. I'm so glad you brought that up, because without the Patriot Act, we can't do anything about these patterns that we notice. We would have to go through court to get a warrant. We have to, find substantial evidence, which is always provided in these cases where the Patriot Act is used. And thus, really, if we were to get rid of the Patriot Act, there would be less safety, less ability of the government to do anything about these perceived threats. And we, the worst case scenario, would have a repeat of something like 9/11. I'm going on to their second contention of inefficiency. They're saying that based on the social contract, people's rights are being taken away. And I have to say, the social contract is about more than just people's rights and about people's rights and authority or law. It's also about taxation, and it's also about it has one other aspect to it. However, these are not this really, when you look at it, the Patriot Act, it's not increasing taxes. It is taking away rights, but it's providing more services. It's providing security and safety, which is, which was agreed to as in their third contention. They said, although it was rushed, but my opponent said, although it was rushed, they did agree. Senate agreed to pass the Patriot Act, which obviously shows that our social contract was taken into account then and afterwards. And they were saying that it took only until October 26th to pass this. That was 45 days. 45 days during Senate time where they had to talk about this. And believe me, this was probably one of the main things that they were talking about at that time. So really, when you look at it, they're saying this was really rushed. It wasn't looked at thoroughly. We're here to say, things have been passed in even shorter time than that. And this really, their contention doesn't stand because that is absolutely okay. Going into their part B of their second contention of inefficiency, they said that this would inherently solve the immigration problems. And they're saying that based on more border control, it's just forcing immigrants to have a harder time to get into the country. But that doesn't solve, if we take away the more difficult ways to get into the country, that won't solve our immigration problems. There will still be people coming in. And it will also piss off the Republicans if we were to do so, creating some kind of congressional gridlock as we have now, even worse than before. So thank you very much, and I would like to urge a vote in favor of the mitigation team.
Which teacher about POIs that you were totally confused?
Oh, yeah, and there's like an official, I like maybe just a hand off the head thing. Yeah, it's like old British Parliament, like I'm extending my hand and I'm holding on my wig.
Showing that you have no weapons.
Yeah.
It's just kind of fun.
Okay. No, it's cool.
Oh, yeah, I go it next.
I like those kind of decorations. That's fun.
And it's kind of cool because it's like only Windsor does it. So
Yeah.
you go to a debate.
Yeah, more people do it, but a lot of people
Oh,
do.
doubt it.
Other
Oh, did
people.
they? I've never seen anybody put this
It's
one.
not even bad.
Well, in like novice, they don't do it.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, they get-
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, they get really.
Okay. Okay, is everyone ready? Alright, starting time now. So now we get to the fun part of the debate, the rebuttal, where we get to summarize what happened today and explain to you how one side won and how one side didn't. So, with that being stated, let me just go into a couple of voters. The first voter is Maslow's hierarchy. Now, this is one of the most widely researched topics in existence. Widely researched studies in existence. Maslow went all around the world to all sorts of different cultures and ethnicities and asked them a series of questions to find out what they liked and what they, well, no. That's moral foundation theory. I'll talk about that later. But Maslow's hierarchy, it's all about what you need before you can get what you want. It's all about water, food, shelter. My partner brought this up. And then safety is a big part of that. And on the top of that is self-actualization. Once you have the baseline established, you can start moving on to more intellectually based topics and theories. So one of the things about Maslow's hierarchy is that you need safety, you need protection before you can start talking about things like privacy and self-actualization. So what the Patriot Act does is it allows us to act upon things like that, upon threats that we discover. It allows us to act upon that. And so what that does is that gives us safety. It allows us to react and therefore make people feel safer. And what that does is that supports that baseline so that people can then move on to more interesting topics. But privacy is on the top of that pyramid. So safety is far more important than privacy because safety is one of the things you have to establish before you can move on to things like privacy. So that's our first voter, is that we need safety more than privacy, and Patriot Act gives us safety at the cost of privacy, and therefore you should vote in favor of the negation team in today's debate because we have shown that security is more important than privacy. And the second voter is that of the judging criteria of today's debate, which is benefits to the social contract. Now, I just talked about the Maslow's hierarchy. Now, let's talk about the moral foundation theory, which is, like I said, one of the most widely researched studies ever done. And so, what that does is it's not particularly just Americans; it's everything. It's humanity. What humanity innately values when a person is born and throughout their lives. And one of the things is care and life and care and harm and being protected from that harm. And so this links back to my first voter that safety is more important than privacy, because according to moral foundation theory, people care about people care. That's one of the six different things that we care that we value as humans is care. And so like I said, we go to Maslow's hierarchy. We support Maslow's hierarchy, and the second voter is we support moral foundation theory. And with those two voters, I strongly urge your vote in favor of the negation team today. Thank you.
Is everyone ready? Wonderful. Sorry, I'm trying to cut down on the usage of fantastic. All right. Then as I begin, I'd like to once again extend a really great thanks to everybody for making this a pretty great debate. What I'm going to be doing in my 5 minutes, how I'm going to be spending my closing speech, is I'm going to be going over kind of some of the points that were brought up by my opponents when I couldn't address it, when our team couldn't address it, aka the second negation. And then I'll be going into the voters for the affirmation team, showing you why at the end of the day, you should in fact repeal the Patriot Act with your ballot. All right, so the first thing I'd like to address is regarding this idea of Maslow's hierarchy. This is something that they brought up in their second speech and then really hammered out, so I have a few responses to this. The first being that Maslow's hierarchy isn't really representative of the judging criteria, which was benefits to the social contract and American values. Nowhere do they link Maslow's hierarchy to American values. In fact, it's completely the opposite. Give me liberty or give me death. One of the most famous sayings from one of the most famous Americans that has ever been born in this country, right? So the very foundation of the United States, the very foundation of our liberty and our freedom was with the knowledge that you're putting your body in harm. And, and that idea is still in today practice. Millions of Americans going to war and fighting for our rights, denying Maslow's hierarchy in favor of American values. The two are not only separate entities, but the Patriot Act is actually something that goes against those core values, that goes against the idea that Maslow's hierarchy should reign supreme. What we're saying is, in the face of American values, as far as American values are concerned, we should go with rights, because that is what our country was built on. We went against the idea of, bodily harm is most important, versus rights. We opted for rights. That is what America was founded on. That's what we should be basing our decision off of. And then the next thing that they brought up was actually a response to our immigration point. They tried to kind of save that point. However, their primary argument against this contention was that people will still get in. People will get in if your act goes through. And my response to this will be people will get in regardless. That's not really unique to the Patriot Act, and that's not really unique to the comprehensive immigration reform. People are going to get in the country anyway through some means. There's no way to absolutely isolate ourselves. Right? There's no feasible way to do it. So really that point doesn't stand either. And then the third and final point that they brought up at the very when we couldn't address it was this idea of, the Patriot Act allows us to react to those terrorist threats. That not only do we get to know about them, but we actually get to react to them. Now, I have two responses to this. The first being that we can react to them anyway, because if you can prove somebody's a terrorist, you can arrest them. It's not like you need the Patriot Act to arrest them. The Patriot Act just makes it so that you can go right around the legislation system. You don't need a warrant at all. My second response to this would be that that's actually a bad thing that you can go around the judges. You should be able to prove whether or not you can arrest somebody. That's the entire idea of having a government that can't just arrest you when they feel like it, right? To know that American society in the status quo, basically the government can come and arrest you if they just think you're a terrorist, that's absolutely atrocious to the very values that this country was founded on. And so as far as this idea of, well, the Patriot Act allows us to respond to these threats, not only can we respond to these threats anyway if we have sufficient evidence, but it's actually a better thing. It's actually more beneficial that we have that system where you have to prove that you can arrest somebody, right? You can't just say, he's a terrorist, I'm going to go arrest him. Okay, great. That's not what we should be doing in the status quo. All right? So now I'm going to be going over the affirmation voters and showing you why when everything kind of rounds out, when the smoke clears, you should be voting for the affirmation. The first being this idea of security. Now, and this is my first voter. Just a generalization about the case. My opponents really hammer home this idea of, oh, we're providing security, we're doing all these things. First of all, they haven't shown that they're providing security. They dropped their own evidence regarding the underwear bomber. They never reaffirmed that. They never said, oh, actually, this is still relevant. We actually refuted that by saying airport security and the Patriot Act, two different things. So as far as security is concerned, the negation hasn't proven that the Patriot Act does anything for security. They haven't. So therefore, as far as this debate is concerned, as far as this matter is concerned, we have all these harms regarding rights. We have all these problems with it. And we don't really have any benefits in regards to security. They haven't shown us any, right? So when you're weighing the two cases, please remember that. My second would be regarding the social contract and security. Once again, this goes back. This kind of is in tandem with my first voter, which is the idea of we're providing all of these violations of the social contract, and seeing as the judging criteria, the scope of this debate is relating to the social contract, the give and take. We're saying all these things, the government is taking all of these things from us, and they're not giving anything back. Why in the United States would we not repeal something that is a clear violation of the social contract and that takes more than it gives? Thank you very much for your time, and I urge a strong vote for the affirmation.